Powerful, innovative, flawlessly designed. For decades, one company has been seen as nearly flawless: Apple. A brand so successful, it's hard to imagine them ever making a huge mistake. But in 1996, with the company on the brink of failure, this was their next big idea: a video game console, designed to take on Nintendo and PlayStation. It was a catastrophic failure, a machine so flawed it was personally erased from history by Steve Jobs upon his return. This is the story of Apple's $599 gaming mistake that cost them tens of millions. To understand how a company like Apple could make a mistake this big, you have to understand what Apple was in the mid-1990s. And it was not the company we know today. Without Steve Jobs at the helm, Apple was in a creative freefall, rapidly losing the computer war to Microsoft. But two new frontiers were exploding into the public consciousness: the multimedia revolution powered by CD-ROMs and the dawn of the internet. At the same time, the video game console wars were raging between Nintendo and a new challenger, Sony, with its wildly successful PlayStation. The living room was the new battleground. Apple, desperate for a new hit, saw an opportunity to conquer all of these markets at once. Their vision was not just another game console, but an affordable, user-friendly Macintosh for the television. A single device that could play games, run educational software, and browse the web. It was a bold idea that would become a legendary failure. The result of this grand division was a strange hybrid device, officially named the Apple Pippin. At its core, it was a stripped-down Macintosh computer running a version of macOS on a CD-ROM drive. But its design was unlike any computer or console Apple had ever made. And it came with this: the Applejack controller. A bizarre, boomerang-shaped piece of plastic with a tiny, imprecise trackball right in the middle. It was awkward to hold and confusing to use, a perfect symbol of the product's confused identity. But the strangest decision wasn't the hardware. It was the business model. Apple decided not to build the Pippin themselves. Instead, they would license the technology to other companies to manufacture and sell. Their primary partner was the Japanese toy and video game giant Bandai. So the device that hit the market was the Bandai Pippin. It promised to be an all-in-one family entertainment system, a game console, an educational tool, and a gateway to the internet. But this revolutionary dream came with a revolutionary price tag. And so, in the spring of 1996, the Bandai Pippin officially launched in the United States. It was Apple's big move to conquer the living room, the moment the company had been building towards for years. It launched with a price tag of $599. Adjusted for inflation, that's nearly $1,200 today. This was at a time when the Sony PlayStation, a vastly more powerful and popular gaming machine, cost just $299. The Nintendo 64 would launch a few months later at only $199. Apple wasn't just asking for a premium, they were asking for double or triple the price of their superior competitors. It wasn't a product launch. It was a commercial death sentence. Priced for failure, the Bandai Pippin landed in stores with a thud. The results were immediate, and they were brutal. Apple and Bandai had projected sales of 500,000 units in the first year. In the end, over its entire lifespan, it's estimated they sold a grand total of just 42,000. It wasn't a failure. It was a rounding error. The disastrous sales created a vicious cycle. With no customer base, game developers had no reason to support the platform. The few titles that were released were mostly lackluster edutainment software or clunky, low-budget games that looked primitive compared to the 3D powerhouses on the PlayStation and N64. There was no killer app to convince anyone to buy in. The press was merciless. Tech magazines called it underpowered and overpriced, and it quickly began appearing on worst tech products of all time lists, where it remains a fixture to this day. The Pippin had failed at everything it tried to be. It was too expensive and weak to be a game console, and too limited to be a useful computer. It was a product with no audience, dead on arrival. By 1997, Apple as a company was just months away from total bankruptcy. The failure of products like the Pippin had pushed them to the very edge of collapse. Then, in a move that would change the course of technological history, the company's long-exiled founder returned. Steve Jobs was back in control. Jobs' mission was brutal and simple: to save Apple by killing everything that wasn't excellent. He famously reviewed the company's entire chaotic product line to decide what would live and what would die. Dozens of products were cut. The Mac clones were eliminated, the Newton PDA was canceled, and the Apple Pippin was put on the chopping block. Jobs had a simple, scathing verdict for the machine. He called it a piece of junk. In 1997, he officially pulled the plug. The final few units were sold off, and Apple's disastrous adventure in the video game market was over. The product and the entire strategy behind it had been officially and unceremoniously unmade. The unmaking of the Apple Pippin was more than just discontinuing a failed product. It was a declaration of a new philosophy for Apple, a course correction that would save the company and ultimately change the world. The failure of the Pippin taught Steve Jobs and Apple 3 crucial lessons that would become their new religion. Focus. Stop making dozens of confusing products and do a few things exceptionally well. Control the ecosystem. Hardware and software must work together seamlessly. Dominate. Never enter a market unless you can be the best.
When we got to the company a year ago, there were a lot of products. These were the product platforms, 15 product platforms, and a zillion variants of each one. I couldn't even figure this out myself.
These lessons became the blueprint for Apple's incredible comeback. First with the iPod, a focused device with a controlled ecosystem called iTunes. And then, in 2007, with the iPhone. It was the ultimate anti-Pippin. It was a superior product that completely redefined its market. And its success was built on the App Store, the open yet controlled ecosystem the Pippin never had. The story of the Apple Pippin is the perfect unmade tale. It's a story of a failed product whose ghost still haunts the halls of one of the world's most successful companies. A powerful reminder that sometimes, for a company to be truly made, its worst ideas must first be unmade.